Every year in America, 7,000 children are abandoned, but in 2013, one case broke the system entirely. A 6-year-old girl, blind and orphaned, was dumped on the side of a highway by the man sworn to protect her, left to die in the weeds. This is the story of what happened next, and the millionaire who saw her story on the news. Her name was Lily. To her stepfather, she was a burden he could no longer carry, a blind child who saw a world he refused to understand. He drove away, leaving her with nothing but the sound of fadding traffic. But across the country, a reclusive tech millionaire was about to see her photo flash across his screen. What happened next would spark a national debate. Was this a rescue or the beginning of a more calculated transaction? Lily's world had already been stripped down to sound and touch long before that highway. Her mother, Sarah, died of a sudden aneurysm when Lily was just 4, leaving her in the custody of a stepfather who saw her blindness not as a tragedy, but as a financial dead end. Mark worked as a long-haul trucker. The Social Security survivor benefits that came for Lily were spent on engine repairs and six-packs. Her world became the cluttered interior of a double-wide trailer outside Bakersfield, California, a map she memorized through bruises, the sharp corner of the coffee table here, the loose floorboard that creaked near the door there. He'd tell neighbors she was slow, too much. The truth was simpler. He'd promised to care for a wife, not a disabled child who wasn't his blood. By the time Lily turned 6, Mark had a new girlfriend who didn't want kids in the picture. The solution for him became a drive she wouldn't remember. It was a Tuesday. He told her they were going to visit a special doctor. He packed a small bag with a change of clothes and her old teddy bear, its one eye missing. He drove for 2 hours until the sprawl of the city gave way to the scrubland of Interstate 5. The air conditioning was broken. Lily felt the sun heat the passenger window on her right cheek. He pulled over onto the gravel shoulder near mile marker 134, the sound of the engine cut. "Wait here," he said. "I'm gonna check the tire." She heard his door open and close. Then the sound of his footsteps on gravel moving away. Then nothing but the whine of semi-trucks barreling past. She waited 5 minutes, 10. The heat in the car grew stifling. She called out for him, her voice small against the roar of the highway. She fumbled for the door handle, tumbling out onto the sharp, hot gravel. She stood there, disoriented, the wind from passing vehicles whipping at her dress. She was found 90 minutes later by a highway patrol officer, curled against a fence post, her face streaked with dust and silent tears. The story made the local news that night. A Good Samaritan alert. A blurry photo of a small, dark-haired girl with unseeing eyes wrapped in a foil blanket. The anchor called it a heartbreaking mystery. And that's when the algorithm found her. On the other side of the country, in a glass-walled penthouse overlooking Central Park, 58-year-old Elias Vance was having his nightly ritual. A single espresso, his bank of monitors scrolling through global news feeds filtered by his own complex parameters, not for market trends, but for stories like this. Specific stories. Elias Vance was worth an estimated $2.3 billion. He'd made his first fortune in encryption software, his second in biometric data. He was intensely private, known in tabloids as the ghost billionaire. He was also a serial adopter. Over the past 15 years, Elias had adopted 7 children from around the world, all with profound disabilities or from extreme circumstances. A boy from Romania with severe cerebral palsy, a girl from Nepal who'd lost her legs in an earthquake. His mansion in the Hamptons was less a home and more a high-care facility, staffed with round-the-clock nurses and specialists. He called it his portfolio of purpose. Critics called it something else. When Lily's photo flashed on his screen, he didn't see a victim. He saw a missing piece. A blind girl, abandoned, with no biological ties to fight him. He picked up a secure line. He didn't call child services. He called a private crisis management firm on his retainer. Within 4 hours, a team was on a private jet to California. Their job was not to investigate, but to acquire, to clear a path through the bureaucratic underbrush. Meanwhile, Lily was in a county holding room, a sterile space that smelled of antiseptic. Social workers were overworked, the system clogged. They were trying to locate any family, starting the process for foster care. They didn't know a billionaire had already drawn a target around her case file. Elia's team moved with surgical precision. They contacted the county with an offer. Vance would cover all immediate medical and care costs. He would provide a temporary foster placement with a vetted, specialized family in New York while long-term options were assessed. To an overwhelmed system, it looked like a miracle. A donation of $250,000 to the county's Child Welfare Division helped grease the wheels. There was no hearing, no review, just a series of urgent signatures. 72 hours after she was found on the highway, Lily was on a private plane, a nurse beside her, headed to a world she could not see and could not possibly understand. She asked if she was going home. The nurse patted her hand and said, "You're going somewhere much better." Act 1 ends not with a rescue, but with a transfer of custody. The gated estate awaited. The staff had been briefed. Elias Vance stood at his vast window, watching the helicopter carrying her touchdown on his private pad. He allowed himself a small, thin smile. The child was here. The real experiment was about to begin. The mansion wasn't a home. To Lily, it was a labyrinth of cold, smooth surfaces and echoing rooms. Her first week was a blur of soft-spoken voices and clinical touch. Every need was anticipated, but no one asked what she wanted. She had her own wing, a bedroom with sensor-activated lights and temperature control, a bathroom with braille labels, a therapy room filled with equipment she'd never known existed. A rotating staff of 3 caretakers and a mobility instructor were assigned to her. Their instructions were clear: document everything. Her sleep patterns, her vocal inflections, her reaction times to new stimuli. Elias Vance wasn't just raising a child, he was collating data. He visited her each day at 4 p.m. He never touched her. He would sit in a chair across the room and ask the same questions. "What did you hear today, Lily? Can you describe the smell of your lunch?" He was calibrating her perception, mapping the boundaries of her world. To the staff, he explained it was cognitive baseline analysis. To Lily, it was just another confusing adult making sounds in the quiet. Meanwhile, the legal machinery Elias had set in motion was purring. His lawyers filed for emergency temporary guardianship in a New York family court, citing the California abandonment and the specialized, life-changing care only he could provide. The judge, seeing binders of reports from hired experts and the county's grateful receipt of donations, granted it. A final adoption hearing was set for 6 months hence. It was treated as a formality. But Lily was adapting in ways the data sheets couldn't capture. She found an ally in Sophia, the youngest of the caretakers. Sophia was the one who broke protocol. She didn't just guide Lily's hand to a spoon, she let Lily feel the texture of the countertop, the chill of the stainless steel fridge. She described the world in colors and shapes, not just functions. "The sky today is the blue of your new jeans, but sadder, like it might cry." Lily began to speak more, her sentences stretching beyond one-word answers. She asked about her teddy bear, the one from the car. It had been discarded as unsanitary. Sophia, on her day off, went to a dozen stores until she found a similar one. When she gave it to Lily, the girl held it to her face for a full minute, silent. Then she whispered, "His eye is still gone." It was the first memory she'd volunteered. Elias noticed the change. He reviewed the audio logs, heard the conversations with Sophia. He didn't fire her. Instead, he promoted her to primary attendant and doubled her salary. Her empathy was a variable he hadn't accounted for, and now he wanted to measure its effect. Then the first crack appeared. A blogger who followed eccentric billionaire philanthropy dug into the Vance adoptions. She published a piece titled "The Ghost Billionaires Collection." It listed the 7 children, their countries of origin, their disabilities. It noted a pattern: all adoptions were finalized with astonishing speed, often during crises or in jurisdictions with lax oversight. All children had conditions that made them less likely to be independently vocal. The article asked a single, damning question: is Elias Vance saving children, or is he curating the perfect, dependent audience? The story didn't go viral, but it landed in the inbox of someone with a very personal interest: Mark, the stepfather. Mark had been lying low, assuming Lily was lost in the foster system. The article named names. It mentioned the Bakersfield abandonment, and it described Elias Vance's net worth. For Mark, it was like seeing a lottery ticket He'd thrown away blow back into his hand. He hired a seedy, ambulance-chasing lawyer. They didn't sue for custody. They sued for wrongful adoption and emotional distress. The claim was ludicrous. Mark alleged that Vance's agents had coerced him into abandoning Lily so the billionaire could swoop in, and that he, Mark, was now suffering profound grief. He wanted a settlement, $10 million. When Elias was served the papers, he didn't rage. He was fascinated. This was a new variable, a parasitic biological tie. He saw it not as a threat, but as a test of his system's resilience. He directed his lawyers to not just fight, but to annihilate. They countersued for every cent of child support Mark had never paid, and for the full cost of Lily's care since her birth, alleging criminal neglect. The legal battle became a slow-rolling spectacle in the tabloids. Billionaire versus deadbeat dad. Lily's photo was everywhere again. Inside the mansion, Elias increased her security detail. Her world, which had begun to slowly expand with Sophia, contracted again. No more walks in the walled garden if press helicopters were spotted. Lily felt the change, the tension in the quiet halls, the new, deeper voices of security men. She started having nightmares, waking up screaming about the sound of cars. Sophia would hold her, rocking her back to sleep, violating another staff rule about promoting independence. Elias observed this too. He scheduled a meeting with Dr. Aris, his chief psychologist. The attachment to Sophia is deepening. It's becoming a primary bond. Is that a vulnerability or a stabilizer? Dr. Aris, whose six-figure salary depended on giving Vance the answers he wanted to hear, advised that a secure attachment could be beneficial, but must be managed. He suggested scheduled bonding time, followed by deliberate separations, to test Lily's resilience. So Sophia was sent on a sudden, mandatory 2-week training seminar in Switzerland. For Lily, it was a second abandonment. She stopped eating. She refused to speak to her other caretakers. She would sit on the floor of her room, facing the door, just waiting. This was the data point Elias found most intriguing. He watched the live feed from her room, noting the duration of her silent vigils. He dictated a memo. Subject demonstrates profound object permanence failure tied to specific affective bonds. This suggests a high ceiling for loyalty, but a critical vulnerability. He had no intention of letting Sophia go. She was a useful tool, but he now knew the price of removing her. The legal war with Mark was escalating in a different way. Mark's lawyer, sensing a bigger payday, had tipped off a major network news producer. They were preparing a segment, bought and paid for, the shadowy adoption of Highway Lily. This wasn't blogger speculation. It was a primetime investigation with resources. Elias' crisis team detected the media probe. They advised a preemptive strike. Go public, but on your own terms. Control the narrative. And so, Elias Vance decided to do something he had never done in his life. He agreed to an interview in his home, with Lily present. The message was to be one of benevolent salvation, a story of technology and compassion intersecting to rewrite a tragic life. The stage was set. The mansion was prepared. Lily was dressed in a beautiful, delicate dress. She was told a nice man was coming to talk to her, to tell people how happy she was. The reporter and crew arrived. The cameras began to roll. Elias sat, composed, one hand resting lightly on the back of Lily's chair. She sat perfectly still, a small, blind girl in a sea of light and murmured activity. The reporter smiled and asked the first, soft question about second chances. Lily tilted her head, listening to the unfamiliar voice. Then she turned slightly toward the sound of Elias breathing beside her, and in a voice clear as glass, loud enough for the microphone to catch, she asked the one question no one had prepared for. When is Sophia coming home? On camera, Elias' placid smile didn't flicker, but his fingers, resting on the chair, tightened until the knuckles turned white. The reporter, sensing blood in the water, leaned forward. The carefully crafted narrative of a grateful child and her savior had just shattered in real time, and the whole world was watching. The clip went viral in under an hour. When is Sophia coming home? Not I'm happy, not thank you, just the name of the woman who'd been taken from her. The internet didn't see a rescued child. It saw a prisoner in a gilded cage. Elias' PR team went into overdrive. They released a statement calling it a momentary confusion, emphasizing Lily's trauma and the stability of her care. But the damage was done. The network aired the full, unedited interview, and the pause after her question, the nearly imperceptible tightening of Elia's jaw, was replayed in slow motion. Memes were made. Hashtags trended, "Who is Sophia?" and "Free Highway Lily." The judge overseeing the adoption, suddenly under public scrutiny, ordered an emergency review by an independent court-appointed advocate. For the first time, a stranger without ties to Elias Vance would be allowed unsupervised access to Lily and her records. That stranger was Anya Sharma, a veteran guardian ad litem known for being impervious to intimidation. She arrived at the mansion with a subpoena for all of Lily's logs, care plans, and staff communications. Elias had no choice but to comply. Anya spent 3 days in the house. She didn't just interview Lily with child psychologists, she sat with her in silence. She listened to the way the staff spoke when they thought no one was recording. She found the memos about object permanence failure and effective bonds. In a locked server, she discovered the true scope of the data collection, not just behavioral notes, but biometrics. Heart rate variability, sleep EEG readings, cortisol levels from saliva swabs, all gathered under the guise of optimized care. Anya's report to the court was a 90-page detonation. She alleged that Lily was less an adopted daughter and more a human subject in a non-consensual longitudinal study, and that the environment, while materially luxurious, was emotionally sterile and manipulative. She recommended the immediate suspension of the adoption proceedings and the appointment of a neutral temporary guardian. The judge agreed. Elias Vance was stripped of his temporary guardianship. Lily would remain in the home temporarily, but a state-appointed monitor would move in, and a search for a new, non-related placement would begin. Elias was not a man who accepted defeat. He saw the system's intervention not as a correction, but as an inefficiency to be bypassed. He filed an appeal, of course, but he also activated a contingency plan known only to his inner circle, Project Anchor. Meanwhile, Mark, the stepfather, saw his opening. With Vance legally weakened, Mark's shady lawyer petitioned for custody, arguing that blood, however toxic, was better than a billionaire's lab. The media circus now had two competing monsters, the cold savior and the deadbeat dad, fighting over a blind girl who just wanted her friend back. It was at this moment of maximum chaos that Sophia returned from Switzerland. She had been kept in the dark, her communications monitored. When she walked back into the mansion and saw the state monitor, the tension, and Lily, who, upon hearing her voice, burst into tears and clung to her leg, she finally understood the scale of the machine she worked for. Anya Sharma took Sophia aside. "She trusts you. That might be the only real thing she has. You have a choice now. You can be part of the system that's failing her, or you can help me get her out." Sophia was terrified. Her family relied on her salary. Vance could destroy her career, but she had also held Lily through the nightmares. That night she made a decision. She began secretly recording her instructions. She documented the times Elias would visit Lily not to interact, but to observe her reaction to a new sound or smell, jotting notes on a tablet. She saved audio files of staff meetings where Lily was referred to as the subject or the asset. She smuggled this evidence to Anya on a thumb drive hidden in a box of chocolates. But Elias' surveillance was omnipresent. His security chief intercepted an encrypted email from Anya to a family court judge, referencing new evidence from a staff whistleblower. They didn't have the content, but they had the source. Sophia was summoned to Elias' private study. "Shout!" He sat behind his desk, the city lights glittering behind him. "Loyalty is a rare commodity, Sophia. I paid for yours. It seems I overestimated its value." He presented her with two options. Option 1, she would be fired for breach of contract and a non-disclosure violation. He would sue her for damages that would bankrupt her family for generations. Option 2, she would publicly recant, stating that Anya Sharma had coerced her and that Lily was happy and thriving. In return, she would receive a $2 million bonus and a glowing reference. She had 24 hours to decide. That night, Sophia went to Lily's room. The little girl was already asleep, one hand clutching the replacement teddy bear. Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, her own hands shaking. She was about to leave when Lily stirred, her unseeing eyes opening. "Sophia," she whispered, "are you going away again?" The question broke her. Sophia knew then that no amount of money was worth the look on that child's face, a look of expecting abandonment, already resigned to it. She made her choice. The next morning, she went to the study and gave Elias her answer. Then she walked out of the mansion, went straight to a federal building, and with Anya Sharma's lawyer by her side, filed a whistleblower complaint with the Department of Health and Human Services, alleging child abuse and unethical human experimentation. This wasn't a family court matter anymore. This was federal. The story exploded onto the front page of every major newspaper. Billionaires' human lab allegations. Politicians called for investigations. Vance's stock price began to tumble. His board of directors demanded answers. In a panic, Elias' lawyers advised him to settle with Mark immediately to make one problem disappear. They offered Mark $5 million to drop all claims and sign a lifetime NDA. Mark, who never wanted a child, only a payday, took the money and vanished. But eliminating Mark backfired spectacularly. The public saw it as proof of guilt, a billionaire buying off the only other claimant to silence him. The pressure intensified. And then the final, most shocking revelation broke. It came from an anonymous tip to a financial crimes unit. The tip alleged that Elias Vance's portfolio of purpose was not just a philanthropic vanity project. It was the cornerstone of a massive tax fraud and insurance scheme. Each child, with their severe, lifelong disabilities, was insured for tens of millions of dollars under obscure caretaker life policies. Furthermore, their care expenses were being used to offset billions in corporate taxes through a Byzantine network of charitable trusts. The children weren't just subjects, they were lucrative financial instruments. The whistleblower provided spreadsheets, policy numbers, and trust documents. The source was later revealed to be a disgruntled former CFO who'd been quietly compiling evidence for years. With this, the world understood the true horror. Lily hadn't been saved from a highway to be given a life. She'd been salvaged from a highway to be given a price tag. Federal agents obtained search warrants for Vance's offices and homes. As black SUVs rolled up the driveway of the mansion, Elias stood once more at his window, watching his empire begin to crack. He turned to his chief of security and gave one last, cold order. "Prepare the evacuation protocol for the assets. We're moving them to the Swiss facility tonight." He wasn't giving up. He was moving his experiment to a jurisdiction beyond the reach of American law. The children, including Lily, were to be sedated for travel under the guise of a medical outing. The staff were told to pack one bag per child. The private jet was being fueled. Anya Sharma, monitoring the house from a rented apartment nearby with Sophia, saw the unusual activity through binoculars. She called her contacts at the FBI. They told her the warrants were for documents and computers, not for the immediate seizure of the children. There was nothing they could do to stop him from taking Lily out of the country in a matter of hours. The system, for all its sudden fury, was still too slow. Sophia looked at Anya, her face pale. "He's going to take her, and once that plane takes off, we'll never see her again." They had run out of lawyers, out of courts, out of time. They had one shot, and it wasn't legal, it was desperate. Sophia's plan was born of pure desperation. She still had her keycard and clearance to the mansion's west wing. She knew the protocol. The children would be brought through the underground garage to a waiting medical transport van, which would take them to the private airfield. She called Anya from a burner phone. "I'm going in. I'll get to Lily. You need to get the police to the South Service Gate in 20 minutes. Tell them there's an illegal medical transport. Tell them anything." Before Anya could argue, Sophia hung up. She drove her own car to a wooded area a quarter mile from the estate, climbed the perimeter fence where the cameras were blind, and ran through the manicured hedges toward the West Service entrance. Inside, the mansion was a hive of controlled panic. Staff moved quickly, their faces tense. Sophia slipped into a staff stairwell, her heart hammering against her ribs. She made it to the residential wing. Through a doorway, she saw two nurses preparing a syringe. A small boy with cerebral palsy was crying softly in his wheelchair. She turned the corner and there was Lily's door. A security guard stood outside. Sophia took a deep breath, smoothed her jacket, and walked straight toward him, flashing her old keycard. "Vance sent me. He wants the subject prepped with the others." The guard, confused by the conflicting orders, glanced at his tablet. "My list says medical handles prep." "Your list is outdated," Sophia said, her voice dripping with a contempt she didn't feel. "Do you want to explain to him why there's a delay?" The guard, wary of Vance's wrath, stepped aside. Sophia entered the room. Lily was sitting on the edge of her bed, dressed in a travel suit, her head tilted. "Sophia," she whispered. "It's me, sweetheart. We have to go right now, and you have to be very, very quiet." "Are we playing a game?" Lily asked, a flicker of hope in her voice. "The quietest game ever," Sophia said, scooping her up. She wrapped Lily in a dark blanket from the bed and moved back into the hall. The guard was gone, likely called to another post. Sophia moved not toward the garage, but back toward the staff stairs. She descended to the basement laundry level, a maze of industrial washers and piping. She knew a maintenance exit that led to the south gardens. Near the service gate, Anya was supposed to have swarming with police. But when she pushed the heavy steel door open, the gardens were dark and silent. No police, no sirens, just the distant thrum of the van's engine starting in the garage. Anya hadn't gotten through in time. Sophia's breath caught. She was alone, holding a blind child, with the entire security apparatus of a billionaire about to discover his most valuable asset was missing. She crouched behind a hedge, clutching Lily close. "Just a little longer, baby," she whispered. Then headlights, not from the gate, but from the main driveway. 2, then 4, then 6 sets of lights moving fast. They weren't police cruisers. They were black SUVs with government plates. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit had arrived early, their warrants now expanded to include obstruction of justice and attempted international kidnapping. Chaos erupted. Security forces scrambled. Orders were shouted. In the confusion, Sophia saw her chance. She ran, Lily a light weight in her arms, toward the flashing blue and red lights now finally piercing the night at the south gate. An agent stopped her. Sophia, sobbing with relief and terror, gasped out, "This is Lily Vance. He was trying to smuggle her out. She needs medical attention." The agent took the child, but Lily screamed, a raw, terrified sound, reaching back for Sophia. "No, Sophia." In that moment, it was over. The story was no longer about legal papers or financial schemes. It was about a child's scream for the only person who had ever shown her consistent kindness. The agent handed Lily back to Sophia. "You stay with her," he said. Elias Vance was arrested in his study, his phone in his hand, halfway through a call to his pilot. He offered no resistance, only a cold, calculating silence. The other 7 children were found sedated in the medical van, which was blocked from leaving the garage. They were taken to a secure pediatric hospital for evaluation. The fallout was swift and total. Vance's corporate empire unraveled as the full scale of the fraud was uncovered. The insurance schemes, the shell charities, the inflated care expenses, it all led back to him. He was indicted on 74 federal counts, including wire fraud, money laundering, and multiple counts of aggravated child abuse. He would spend the rest of his life fighting the charges from a detention center, his assets frozen. But for Lily, the fight was just beginning in a different way. She was placed into emergency foster care. Anya Sharma fought fiercely to have Sophia approved as a temporary foster parent, given their bonded relationship and Sophia's role as whistleblower. The court, after extensive evaluation, agreed. Lily moved into Sophia's small apartment. The transition was brutal. The trauma of her early abandonment, the sterile manipulation of the mansion, and the violent disruption of her rescue left deep scars. She had night terrors. She was wary of new sounds, new people. She would sometimes sit for hours, just listening, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. But Sophia was patient. She found Lily a therapist specializing in childhood trauma and sensory disabilities. She learned Braille to help her read. They built a life, not of gilded cages, but of small, real things. The smell of burnt toast, the feel of rain on the balcony, the sound of the neighbor's dog barking. A year after the raid, a final adoption hearing was held, not in a closed chamber, but in an open courtroom with media present. Sophia petitioned to adopt Lily. The judge asked Lily, now 7, if she understood what that meant. Lily, holding Sophia's hand, said, "It means she chooses me back every day." The gavel fell, it was done. The final, surprising detail emerged years later. With stability and genuine love, Lily's mind, once studied as a problem to be solved, blossomed in an unexpected direction. Her hyper-acute hearing and memory for sound patterns, traits Vance's scientists had logged as data points, revealed an extraordinary gift. By age 12, she had perfect pitch and could play complex musical pieces on the piano after hearing them just once. At 14, she won a national competition for young blind musicians. The prize money was put into a trust for her college education. She was not a miracle child saved by a millionaire. She was a wounded child healed by a choice, Sophia's choice to love her and her own choice to trust again. Elias Vance's legacy became a footnote in financial crime textbooks. Lily's legacy was just beginning. She grew up in a home where she was seen not as a subject, but as a daughter, where her blindness was not a disability to be managed, but a different way of experiencing a world that was finally, steadfastly kind. The mansion was sold. The trusts were dissolved. The other children were placed with vetted, loving families, their lives quiet and private. The system, shamed by its failure, implemented stricter oversight for high-profile adoptions. The story that began on a dusty highway ended not with a dramatic rescue, but with a quiet morning in a modest apartment. Lily, now a teenager, making pancakes with Sophia, laughing as she fumbled with the measuring cup. The radio playing softly in the background. A home filled not with the hum of servers, but with the simple, unobserved music of an ordinary, cherished life. She had been thrown away like nothing, but in the end, she was found by everything that actually matters. So what does the story of Highway Lily leave us with? It's more than a tale of one bad man and one good woman. It's a blueprint of how systems fail and how they can be forced to change. We saw a child welfare apparatus so overwhelmed that a billionaire's checkbook looked like a solution. We saw a legal framework that moved slowly until public shame forced its hand. And we saw the ultimate, uncomfortable truth that rescue is not a transaction. It cannot be bought, and it cannot be engineered in a lab. It is built in the quiet, unobserved moments of choosing to stay. Lily's case sparked real reform. Lily's law, passed in 2019, established stricter vetting for private adoptions by individuals with no prior biological or foster relationship to the child. It mandated independent advocate reviews in high-profile or high-wealth adoption cases. It didn't fix everything, but it built a wall where before there was only an open door. The other children from Vance's estate are living private lives. Some have found adoptive families. Others are in long-term therapeutic care. Their stories are theirs alone, but their collective ordeal served as a stark warning about the commodification of vulnerability. And what of the human impulse that drives stories like this? Our outrage at the abandonment, our hope for the rescue, our suspicion of the savior with an agenda. It reveals a collective understanding that every child's value is intrinsic. It cannot be enhanced by a millionaire's mansion, and it cannot be diminished by a highway's gravel. Lily, now a young woman, continues her studies in music. She rarely gives interviews. When asked what she remembers, she says she remembers the sound of Sophia's voice and the smell of pancakes and the feeling of being held without being measured. She is not a symbol. She is a person living a life that was almost stolen from her twice, first by neglect, then by a perverse form of attention. The road from that highway shoulder led through a gilded cage, through a legal battlefield, and finally to a kitchen where the coffee is always slightly too strong and the laughter is real. It's a road that reminds us that the most powerful force in the world isn't money or data or control. It's the stubborn, ordinary courage of one person saying, "I choose you," and then proving it day after day in a world that often chooses otherwise. If this story made you think, made you feel, or made you question the easy narratives we're sold, then you've already done the most important part. You've paid attention. And in a world full of noise, that's the first step toward change. Thank you for watching. If you want more stories that dig beneath the headline, hit subscribe. We'll see you next time.